Okay, welcome back. For the next few videos, we'll be focusing on creating the blog app that I showed in the last video. And it's going to take a few videos. We're going to go one route at a time because of how important these RESTful routes are. In this first video, we'll be focusing on index. And then we'll go in order. We'll focus on new and create, and then show, edit, and update, and then finally a video on destroy. And along with creating the app and adding in the 7 routes that we need, I'm also going to introduce Semantic UI, which is another framework out there similar to Bootstrap for CSS and JavaScript. So again, in the last video I mentioned why really I like how it looks. That's one reason. But most importantly, I just want to expose you to another framework so that you can see how similar things are. You might be thinking it's a bad idea for me to show you another framework to bombard you with all this information. But the good news is things are so similar. Once you see 2 or 3, you start to see just how much they have in common, and that it's really more that they have in common than they do differently. So Semantic UI, but we're going to start by creating our app. So I'm inside of a directory called RESTful Routing. If you want to follow along, there is a solution already there. So if you want to reference that, feel free to do that. And if you don't want to go through the creation of the app, if you don't want to cover index, new, and create because you've seen that before, you can skip ahead. But I recommend you go through all the routes with me, code along. It's really important that we get this down. It's really the bread and butter of our Express apps. Okay, so we'll create our application. I'll just call it blog app. Actually, let's call it RESTful blog app. And then cd, and then our favorite npm init. App.js is our entry point. Great. That's okay. Okay, now let's install some things that we need. So npm install, and the first one, of course, is Express. And then we'll also add in Mongoose. And while we're here, we'll do body parser. So those 3, -- save. Remember that body parser is how we get data out of the form. The form sends data into the request body, and then we parse the request body using body parser. So that will be in the next video. For now, we're just doing index. So we have that set up. Let's create our app.js. Now we'll open up app.js and do our standard top of the file where we require Express, and then we'll do app equals Express, and we'll also add in body parser just while we're here, equals require body - parser, and finally we'll do Mongoose. And I do like to clean this up. I like to order them by length as well, so we end up with body parser first if we follow my convention, but it's not that important. But just so you know, I do like to do this. So body parser first, and then next we have Mongoose, and then Express, and then app. And that's just to line them up by length, and then we can indent things if we really want to. But it's not the point of this video, so I won't spend too much time doing this. Okay, so we have that done now. Make sure we have our semicolon. Next up, we need to set up Mongoose. So our blog model, it's going to be called blog, will have a title, it will have an image URL, and then we'll just call it body, which will be the blog text, the content of that post. So title, image, and body, and they're all strings. And we'll also add in something new you haven't seen, which is a date. So created will be a date. So let's comment that out. And before we can do any of that, we need to configure Mongoose. So we need our mongoose.connect, and we're going to connect to MongoDB : //localhost / the name of our app. And our app will be called RESTful blog app. And again, that doesn't matter. We're creating it for the first time. So as long as we don't change this in the future, it will always connect to RESTful blog app. The first time it will create it. Okay, and just so we don't have to do this later on, let's set up our app.set view engine to be EJS, which we also need to install. And while we wait for that to go, let's do an app.use express.static in the public directory so that we can serve our custom style sheet when we get to that. It's just good practice to do at the beginning of any Express app. And we'll also add in app.use body parser, which is our body parser.url encoded true extended :true. Kind of a mouthful, but again, these 3 lines you can just copy from pre-existing apps as well. So we have that set up. Then at the very bottom, just to make sure our Express app is working, let's do the app.listen, where we have process.env.port, process.env.ip, and we'll add in our callback, console.log, server is running. All right, let's test it out. No problems. Great. So now let's work on Mongoose. So we have Mongoose connected. Now we need to create our schema and our model. So we'll start with the schema. We'll just do a var blog schema equals new mongoose.schema, like that, and it'll have a title that's a string, an image that's a string, a body that's also a string, and then we're having our date, which we're calling created. And what we can do is just say date, but this isn't that convenient because we'll have to manually specify the date. We don't want a user to actually type in the date. We just want it to take the current date when this user created the post or created the blog, just grab that date. So we can set a default value, which is something new. We specify type as date, but then we also specify default date.now, and that will work just fine for us. And this says that created should be a date and that there's a default value date.now. So we could also do the same thing for image. If we wanted to have a default image, we could do type string and then default. If a user didn't enter an image, we could have a string like placeholder image.jpg or something. But we won't do that, but we could easily do that if we wanted to. Okay. And one last note here. You'll see this indented sometimes, like this. It's just an object, so because it's short, I'm not going to do this. I think it takes up too much space. Our app.js is going to be cluttered as it is, so I'll leave it like this. Okay, title, image, body, created. And then the next step, get rid of these for now, is to compile it into that model. So var blog equals mongoose.model blog schema. There we go. Save that. And I'm going to add in a comment here that just says mongoose/model config up here. We'll just add another comment here just called app config. And then we'll add in a comment here, routes. Let's just call it RESTful routes. So this is where we'll now go and add our index route, our show route, new, create, all 7 routes. And yes, this file is going to be a little bit cluttered. Again, I'm a broken record on this, but we will be splitting this off into separate things very soon. I'll show you how we can have a models file, multiple models files, how we can have routes files, how we can have files for configuration and for middleware, lots of different things. But to keep it simple early on, I don't want to confuse you. I think it's hard to watch if someone switches files constantly. It's hard to keep track. So we're going to do it in one file, but just remember this isn't necessarily the best practice if this was a really large app, and especially if we had a lot of developers working on it. So now we start on the RESTful routes. So remember, we're starting with index. Name is index. The path should be /blogs as a GET request, and it should list all the blogs. So let's do that now. Before we do that, let's make sure things work. If I run my app, no problems yet. And let's actually do a single creation of a blog so we have something to look at. So it'll be really simple. Just to review, blog.create, and then we want to have title, we'll just call it test blog, image, and I'll take an image from this site unsplash.com, which is a great resource I'll show you in a future video that has a bunch of free images that you can do whatever you want with. And so I'm just going to take this one of a dog and copy that in there. That can really be any URL. We just want to have something to test. And then we'll have our body, and our body will just be hello, this is a blog post. And we'll leave created blank. All right, so let's just try this. We won't do anything as far as a callback. We'll just assume that it works, and then we'll test out in our Mongo console. So let's run the file. Nothing happens, or it appears like nothing happens. But if we go to Mongo and we use RESTful blog app, that's what we called it, just to double check, and then we do db.blogs.find, we have our first blog in there, which is great. So that does two things for us. One, it proves that our model is set up correctly, but two, once we get the index going, we want to make sure we have something to see, because it's supposed to list all the blogs. If we don't have any blogs to see, then it's a little underwhelming, and we won't be able to tell if it works. So we'll exit out of there. Now let's focus on our route. So I'm going to get rid of this. I don't want to create a new blog every single time I run this app, especially not the same one over and over, though that dog is really adorable. What we want to do is create our index route, again, /blogs as a GET request. And that just looks like app.get/blogs. Add in our standard request response callback, and then we'll do a res.render, and the template that will render will just be called index.ejs. And we don't need the EJS, so just index, and that's again because of this line here. We don't need .ejs. What we do need is a template called index in a directory called views. So we'll do that now. Make directory views, touch views/index. And I did make a small mistake, which is we want index.ejs. So for some more practice, we'll remove that file, or I'll remove it at least, views/index, and then recreate it. Touch views/index.ejs. And then we'll open it up. And we'll just start with a simple h1 index page and save. So let's see that we get that index page. Right now it's not fulfilling the index page functionality. Now if we go to our preview, which you can get to from a few ways, I just go to webdevbootcamp.com-learnwithcolt.c9.io, or you can go to preview running application. It will open it up here, but then you can click this button to see it in your browser. Or you can keep it here if you prefer it. Okay, so we get an error here, and that's because we don't have a root route. So we need /blogs, and we get our index page route. It is conventional for the root page, the home page, to go to the index of something. If you think of Reddit or Facebook, for example, on Reddit, you go to the home page and you see an index of all of the Reddit posts. On Facebook, you see an index of all the posts and photos and whatever else there is. So let's do that now. app.get/function request response, and we'll just do a res.redirect to /blogs. Now if we restart, we refresh, nothing should change, but if I go to /, I end up on /blogs as well. Okay, so now let's add in the index functionality. So we need to retrieve all of the blogs from the database. So that's going to be a blog.find. I want to find everything. And then we'll have our callback with an error, and then our data, which we'll call blogs. And then we'll do an if error, and let's just do a console.log error, else. We'll add in our res.render index, except we don't want to just keep it like that. We want to render index with data. So our data will be, let's call it blogs as well, is equal to blogs. So we're passing the data coming back from the database from our .find. Whatever comes back, we're then sending it through under the name blogs. Yes, it's a little confusing, but this is really pretty conventional to see where they have the exact same name. Okay, so now let's go to our template and add in some code. Let's just take a look at blogs to start, just like that. Make sure it's getting there. Refresh the page, and we're getting our list. It's one blog right now, but we're seeing it here. Great, so now let's display it a little nicer. We won't do anything crazy, but what we will do is loop through all blogs. So blogs.forEach function blog, and then we need this down here. Oops. And then down here we need our other tags, the closing bracket, there we go, and then we need our parenthesis as well. And for each one, we'll make a div, and inside that div, let's do an h2, and that will be the title, blog.title. Remember, we need the equal sign there, but not on the each or the brackets. Then we'll display an image, and source is equal to EJS brackets, blog.image. And I forgot to mention this, if you take a look at created, you can see we have this nice crazy date time here that was created for us automatically because we set it as the default value. So we can display that too, just below the image. We'll just do a span for now that has blog.created. And then of course, we need our blog post itself, which will be a paragraph, which is body. All right, a lot of content there. Refresh the page, and you can see our first blog post is here. You'll just have to trust that this is working for now. Yes, it's showing us one. Technically, we don't know if it's showing us all of them yet because we only have one in the database. In the next video, we'll work on new and create.